Commitment, honesty, integrity, these are the core values that create the foundation for Umbrella Corp.
We've gotta be dreaming.
Somebody was capable of getting me the hell out of here.
Jill, over here!
Hey everyone, it's Soul here, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. I knew this was going to happen eventually, but this is the first game in our Resident Evil journey where I feel kind of disappointed. Resident Evil 2's remake was outstanding. Yes, it has its issues, it's not perfect, and in my opinion, it faces the two main issues that bring it down during your second campaign or second playthrough, but overall, the atmosphere of the game and the emotional and intriguing characters of Leon Kennedy and Claire Redfield was an amazing experience. But Resident Evil 3, despite all of my excitement to finally get to know Jill Valentine as a character, with hers being the only campaign in the game, well, it went on to face many little problems that all added together to create a subpar gaming experience that wound up feeling rushed and unpolished during my first playthrough. Was it fun? Yeah, playing through it was decently fun, but by the end of that game, I knew I wouldn't ever replay it, and I felt unfulfilled with the overall story. So I find myself wondering, why the constant rush? Why did everything in this game feel as if you blink and you miss it? You blink and you'll miss the introduction to Nemesis chasing you. You blink and you'll miss the 1 or 2 lines that talk about Jill's internal conflict within this game. I mean, every single interaction that you go on to have with Nemesis results in a chase scene or a brief fight, and it makes him feel second best to Mr. X. I can't even remember the name of the main villain in this story because of how badly they rushed through it. Nikolai is his name, by the way. I just had to look that up. So let's discuss not only where I feel they rushed this story and why I feel it got rushed, but more importantly, the aspects to Jill's character that I feel got skipped over. Before we launch in though, please remember to hit that like button, click subscribe to see more videos from me, follow me over on Twitch, and leave a comment down below. Here is your one and only warning, that this video contains spoilers. Alright, grab your grenades, make that vaccine, and let's fly to safety. Resident Evil 3's remake came out a little bit over a year since the release of Resident Evil 2's remake, and while many fans say they did this release pattern to copy that of the original games, Resident Evil 3's remake ends up feeling rushed and unfinished. I can't help but wonder if this rush to get it out to mirror that of the originals is partially to blame for the faults and the shortcomings of this game. Yet, the actual gameplay experience started off pretty good in my opinion. We enter into this nightmare sequence that Jill is currently having, where we see that she is scared and almost paranoid of becoming infected after the terrifying events in the Spencer mansion. I won't lie to you guys, the first-person point of view had me a bit panicked because I really wanted to connect with Jill the same way I just connected with Leon and Claire. But, thankfully, when she wakes up, it switches back to that third-person point of view angle. As we search through her apartment, it is then that we see her fear has gone on to almost manifest into a form of obsession with taking down Umbrella. I really like the setup because I think it shows us immediately what Jill's internal struggles are going to be within this game. Or at least what I feel they should have been, because the longer I think about it and the more times I analyze Jill as a character within this story, the more vague her internal struggles within this game become. But more on that a little bit later on, because at this point in the intro, I was really intrigued. And with the sudden entrance of this mutated tyrant breaking through the wall, we have this chaotic chase scene with Jill trying to run away and escape with her life. But despite the incredible energy this chase scene creates for the opening, I wasn't a big fan of them cutting back and forth from the cutscenes to the playable moments. You basically just run straight forward, and I found these transitions to be a little bit clunky. Maybe it was the slow-mo moments, I'm not exactly sure, but I think me personally, I would have much rather preferred regular QuickTime buttons rather than just running straight forward like this. But putting the mechanics aside, the energy is again great in this intro scene, and Jill ends up escaping the creature as she winds up in the alleyway meeting up with Brad, who most of you will remember is the one steering the helicopter during the events of Resident Evil 1.
Come in, Stars Alpha Team. Come in. Does anybody hear me?
With this mysterious tyrant that we will come to know as Nemesis hot on their tails, the chaos of this chase scene leads to the chaos in the streets of Raccoon City. Somehow, despite the infected situation slowly growing since the events of the Spencer Mansion, it's suddenly built to this extreme where the infected have taken over the city seemingly overnight. As the pair try to outrun these infected, Brad goes on to sacrifice his life in order to make sure that Jill can escape. But as she makes her way to the rooftop, Nemesis is there ready to take her.
Sorry.
With no real weapons, Jill attempts and fails to stop this creature with the car, before we are then introduced to a brand new character.
Hey! Fuckface!
Rocket launcher in hand, Carlos saves Jill by delaying Nemesis long enough for the two of them to head down to the subway station, where Carlos and his team have actually been gathering survivors. But it's in this moment, during these conversations between Jill and Carlos's introduction here, that we learn his team is the UBCS, a branch of Umbrella's massive company specifically designed to help save civilians in the case of an outbreak. Jill is understandably angered by this.
Whoa. What are you talking about? We're just here to help people. What's wrong with Umbrella?
Oh, the secret research lab.
What's wrong with Umbrella?
Duh.
Oh my god. Your company is responsible for infecting everyone.
Yeah. I don't know anything about all that.
Sadly though, this is the last mention of her distrust in Umbrella and her distrust in Carlos. It seems as if this should be a major setup point for her character. This should be a huge point of conflict between her and Carlos, and yet, despite these few lines of brief bickering, they go on to work together immediately and without a hint or a whiff of distrust ever again.
All right, Super Cop. Here you go. We can use this to stay in contact.
I know what a radio is.
We just saw how terrified Jill is of Umbrella, how determined she is to take them down, and yet she has zero hesitation in working with this group that is owned and run by Umbrella. I guess the implication, at least in this scene, is that Jill cares too much about the civilians to waste time arguing with Carlos or the company. And while I do feel that works, and it does speak to her as a character, since she's always putting the innocent above all else, I will also admit that looking back at the overall story, it's incredibly disappointing to see a point of conflict being dropped so quickly, especially knowing that Jill's internal conflict in her entire story isn't exactly clarified by the ending. So with those scared civilians waiting for the power to get turned on, Jill rushes back into the chaos of the city in order to get the power plant up and running. This journey through the city is probably the slowest the game gets within the first half of the game. It is a much needed moment of calm after all the chaos we just went through. However, it still feels like it's rushing too much. I personally think that this is probably due to the fact that the area to explore is so limited. The streets themselves are blocked off, there's buildings that you can't enter, and then you only have one or two buildings that you can go through and explore, or simply walk through in order to get to the next area. But sadly, there isn't any space to truly wander through like there was within the mansion and the police station. We never really get a true moment of safety and exploration, since we are lacking a main and central hub to this gameplay for us to truly wander through and explore. Now, on one hand, I do feel that if they had a main area, It would have been helpful in slowing down the overall pacing. You could have added in a lot more puzzles, but on the other hand, I do understand the creator's desires to keep us within the streets and to let us sit within the chaos of these events. But I still can't help but feel that if they expanded these streets, gave us more buildings to run through and explore, we would be able to have the best of both worlds, getting to see the chaos of this environment, while also having a moment to explore and wander around. What makes this section even more frustrating for me is the fact that they blocked off some sections with the lockpick that we can't even go to once we pick up the lockpick because Nemesis is right on our tail. So while yes, this area is a bit of a dip in energy, a bit of a slower point, a moment for us to kind of slow down and take somewhat of a deep breath, I really don't find it to be a strong section of gameplay at all. After this brief exploration, Jill makes her way to a building where she finds an injured member of the UBCS.
Yeah, careful. Come on, don't look at me like that, alright? I'm not infected. No, wait, please!
Nikolai, the main villain of the game, doesn't even try to hide the fact that he is evil as he shoots his colleague who might have been perfectly healthy. But the other main takeaway from this, aside from Nikolai being evil, is the disconnect between these two characters' morals. Nikolai is obviously fine killing innocent people's lives if it means preserving his own, while Jill is definitely not. However, this disconnect brings up a third internal conflict for Jill's character, which we never really get clarified or resolved by the end of the story. We have the fear and the paranoia of getting infected causing her to die. We have the lack of trust in the UBCS because of her distrust and her fears of the Umbrella Corporation as a whole. And we now have the moral implication and struggle of Jill being mocked by Nikolai about not being able to shoot someone who's innocent in order to save her own life. But the sad reality is, 2 out of 3 of these things are just sort of used as foreshadowing of events, rather than a true conflict for the character of Jill. We never see her internalize these fears, we never see her struggle with her own morals, we never see her true emotions come out in relation to these challenges. And the one point of conflict that isn't foreshadowing is resolved almost instantly, with Jill pushing aside all of her hatred and distrust for Umbrella, openly trusting Carlos in an instant, causing us to be left with no real conflict for the character of Jill Valentine. With this lack of expansion, this introduction for Nikolai is very unfulfilling in hindsight. But in that moment, when I was first playing through it, I was curious to see how these two would go on to butt heads throughout the gameplay. So with Jill finally getting to the power station, she finds out that it's overrun by these infected spiders and she has to fight her way through without getting poisoned in order to turn on all of the generators.
Ugh, gross. Okay. Oh, Jesus. How is she not dead? Oh, what the? Ew. Eat your greens.
This section of gameplay was actually a really nice change in pace. I liked this setting looking so different from everything, but sadly, yet again, it is rushed through severely. We can easily run around through here with little to no issues, and if you just keep running forward and follow the pathway, you will easily get to the next generator. They even added in these maps that I didn't know were maps at the time, but if you really got stuck and you couldn't find your way running through there, you could always go back, look at the maps for directions, and then be able to find all of the generators. It was just a really quick interaction here, and then you leave, and you never return to this area again. I liked the fact that it was secluded because I liked that these enemies couldn't follow me out into the streets, but if I'm being honest, I wanted to go back here for a missing piece to the puzzle. After getting used to so much backtracking in the previous 2 games, I'm genuinely surprised that this isn't connected to the rest of the gameplay. But then again, maybe I shouldn't be that surprised, considering how short the gameplay actually is. So with this section over, and with Jill picking up that lockpick, you step outside and head towards the control room in order to program the train's pathway, but as you make your way towards the building, that is when Nemesis decides to jump down from his launch pad and chase you through the streets. While Nemesis is definitely a powerful and intimidating tyrant to look at, I wouldn't necessarily say that he is scary. At least not scary in the way that Mr. X was, as he chased you around the RPD. Mr. X is terrifying because he endlessly pursues you and stalks you through the police station. He walks through the building right after you hear his footsteps echoing everywhere you go. But here, with Nemesis, that looming presence that we felt with Mr. X is taken away because Nemesis is introduced with a cutscene every single time. Don't get me wrong, Nemesis is visually terrifying in my opinion because he constantly mutates and he's pulling out these crazy attachments from his seemingly endless inventory box, but he still doesn't come close to the fear I felt when playing Resident Evil 2. Another issue I felt that this section had is the fact that there's nowhere to run. You can't duck into another room, you can't turn the corner, there is one passageway with maybe a slight deviation here or there, and with me getting stuck on the same corner multiple times, it definitely started to get a bit frustrating. But thankfully, it's not that long of a section of gameplay, and you are able to eventually get to the control room, where you get a mini puzzle here where you plan the route for the train, before making your way back to the subway station. But as we reunite with Carlos, we also bump into Nikolai once more.
Nikolai, how are we doing?
The town's crawling with those freaks. No chance of fighting our way out of the city. Why is she here?
She's helping get the trains running again.
Bad time to start carrying dead weight for her. She's unreliable. Can't pull the trigger when it counts.
Hey, take it easy.
She'll get you killed.
This interaction between these two characters really started to frustrate me because of the fact that Jill does not defend herself. She never fights back against Nikolai's words. We also get this one line from Nikolai that foreshadows the fate for Carlos, and overall, this scene teaches us more about Nikolai and Carlos than it does about Jill. This right here, this interaction and the lack of a response from Jill is what I mean when I say that we never get to see her side of this internal struggle that the game has set up so nicely for us. They never dive deeper into her thoughts and her feelings, and the more it goes on, the more frustrated I become. And while they definitely could have done a whole scene between Carlos and Jill where she would show her feelings about what Nikolai had just said and talk about her conflicts with Umbrella, give us some sort of argument between these two about Umbrella and her distrust for him or the company or something, instead, they have Nemesis come and attack the subway station, causing Jill to run off to try and protect not only the civilians but also Carlos and his team as they get the train going. Now, I've said it before in my Resident Evil 2 video, but it's very likely that I might just be looking for story elements that the creators of the game don't want there. The fact that these games, at their core, are survival horror games, and the mechanics of survival horror come before the story elements, holds true throughout the entire series. But sadly, within this game, the gameplay isn't that intense. This chase scene, for example, is running straight forward yet again. There's nothing creative going on in the gameplay. We're not going on a scavenger hunt. We don't need to find a piece to the puzzle. And I find myself wondering, why did they end up dropping the ball on both sides of the court here, since the gameplay doesn't make up for the lack of the story and vice versa? So as Jill gets separated from the rest of the group, I was really holding out hope for the second half of this game, hoping that the story might develop a little bit more. But sadly, this section in the sewage tunnels is also not that great. Down here, Jill is entirely isolated. She's on her own, and we don't go on to learn anything new about her character. We also, going around these tunnels, don't learn anything new and crucial about Umbrella and their plans. Yes, we get the Hunter Gammas, this brand new enemy type that do look cool, but you very quickly discover that they have a weak point in their mouth, and that sort of takes away the fear as you go forward, easily killing them throughout the rest of the tunnels. With nothing really driving the story at this point, it's not surprising at all to find that Nemesis was waiting for us to grab us and throw us into yet another chase scene, but this time there is actually a little bit of a difference as we finally get to the first true boss fight with Nemesis here. This boss fight showdown I did actually find to be a bit enjoyable. I like that it's a small contained area, we can't run away, we have to confront him, there's not really any places to hide or dodge his attacks either, but this overall boss fight goes fairly quickly, and Jill narrowly escapes with her life jumping off the edge of this building. With Nemesis being defeated, at least for right now, Jill makes her way back to the subway station, wandering through a new part of the city. It's on her way there that we get a really nice section where we see the outside of the RPD's parking garage. This got me really excited because I loved seeing this area that I knew and recognized. I loved seeing where Leon and Claire would both be in just a few hours later. It was a really nice way to join these two games together, and it just kind of added a little bit of continuity to the timelines of all of these major events. Joining these games even further though, we enter into Kendo's gun shop, and we see that Jill and Kendo have a nice working relationship here.
Sorry, I got a little jumpy there. Didn't know quite what to expect.
No shit. Look, we're using the subway to get people out of town. You in?
Look, don't worry about me. I'm gonna make other arrangements, okay?
You better. You're the best gunsmith around.
Oh, no.
Don't do anything stupid.
Oh, that's your job, right?
These little tidbits and snippets tying everything into the world of Resident Evil and Raccoon City was really nicely done, and I absolutely loved these fleeting moments of overlap. Yet, with Jill finding her way back to that area outside the subway station, she is once again attacked by Nemesis, but this time, he appears to have found a rocket launcher of his own. Bitch! Oh, we need the herbs. Oh, we need the herbs. With heads rolling down the steps, Carlos comes to our rescue once more as we narrowly escape the oncoming pursuit of Nemesis yet again. But as Jill boards the subway car, Carlos reveals that he actually has to stay behind in order to search for and rescue a missing researcher that works for Umbrella.
It's alright, you're going ahead. I'm not gonna die on you, leave you in a cold, cruel, Carlosless world.
With the two of them parting ways in this almost bittersweet moment as we see they've grown to care about each other just a little bit, I was kind of curious to see what would happen next here now that they're going to be so far apart. So as Jill enters the subway car with Nikolai and the leader of the UBCS, it doesn't take long since the train starts moving for Nikolai to reveal his true evil intentions.
Funny how brainless zombies can ambush a platoon like that. Funny the gate was locked.
After an argument with his leader and Nemesis's sudden arrival on the train, Nikolai locks the both of them in the subway car, effectively leaving them behind to get killed, causing Jill to survive only because of the actions and sacrifice of the UBCS's leader as he blows up both himself and Nemesis.
Get off my train, shitbird!
This is now the second time in the game that someone has sacrificed their life in order to save Jill. I don't mind her being a damsel in distress every now and then, but on top of Carlos continuously saving Jill's life, we now have two people that have directly sacrificed themselves in order to save her. Looking at all of this in hindsight, it is a bit disappointing that we don't really see Jill truly fight her own battles and win. But speaking of Carlos, while Jill is knocked unconscious, we get to see what he's been up to at the RPD. Now, this right here is probably my favorite section in the entire game, purely for the overlap that it has with Resident Evil 2. I loved seeing how these certain bodies got into these spots. I love seeing the continuity that these areas had, because in some ways, I feel like it sort of healed me from the issues that I had with continuity in relation to Resident Evil 2's A and B stories. But with Carlos and his team looking for this researcher, they wind up in the STAR's office where they find a video on the computer showing that the researcher is actually trapped at the hospital across the city. But aside from finding out where he is, they go on to discover that he actually might have a cure. Yet, as the two of them are about to leave the RPD and head over to the hospital, that is when Carlos gets the distressing messages from Jill on the radio.
Yeah, what's up? Derailed. Was anyone hurt?
Jill?
Ah, shit. shit. Wait, what? Jill! Jill, what happened? Jill, come in! T, I gotta go.
Do what you gotta. I'll take care of Bart.
Cutting back to Jill's side of the story here, we see her waking up in the subway tunnels after this horrible crash. As she makes her way to the surface, not knowing exactly where she is or where to go, she crosses this bridge before she is suddenly attacked by Nemesis yet again as he jumps out of the water and attacks her in this mutated form. Now, I will admit, Nemesis here looks pretty cool. He almost has the fins of a fish as he was hiding in the river, and now he's jumping and crawling all around on all fours in this fast-moving, intimidating form. With nowhere to go, Jill is left only to fight this creature once more in a desperate attempt to finally defeat him for good. Now this boss fight I thought was pretty fun. I like the sort of circle arena that it has going on. I like the fact that we had all of these landmines that we could use, but ultimately, the boss fight will end in only one way. Carlos will once again jump in to save the day, but not before Jill gets shot at by Nemesis with some sort of venomous dart. Jill has now been officially infected. I will admit that when this happened, I was quite surprised she got infected this early on. I guess I didn't realize just how short the overall gameplay was, so I thought this would be closer to the ending, more of a grand finale moment and the mad rush to get her cured, so I was quite surprised that it was actually closer to the midway point. I also feel that because Jill didn't vocalize any of her fears in relation to that nightmare of getting infected, the fact that it didn't become a part of her character, and we never saw that fear reflected in her actions throughout the story, that's probably also why I think I was a bit surprised at this moment. But with all that being said, I was still holding out just a little bit of hope that she might vocalize some of these concerns and fears after she got cured.
You hang in there, Super Cop. I got you.
So with Carlos not wanting to lose Jill, he goes on to take her to the hospital in hopes that the researcher has the cure he needs. As Carlos leaves Jill behind, he goes forward to explore the hospital, which was a much-needed rest in the high-intense, action-heavy sequences we just played through. But while I like this area, and I do like the fact that we have a true safe room, kind of like we did in Resi 1, and I enjoyed seeing the hunters, and I enjoyed wandering around and finding these keys, and truly being able to explore a space unlike we had in this game so far, I kinda got a bit bored with it. The notes that we're finding, they don't tell us anything new about the lore of Umbrella. The setting isn't that great. I do think the setting could be a bit more unique and interesting. And the fact that we play through this area again as Jill really makes me not like this setting even more, because it starts to feel like it just drags out way too long. Making our way through the hospital, Carlos does go on to eventually find the doctor, but sadly, he didn't quite get there in time. But while Umbrella may have killed him, the researcher was smart enough to plan ahead.
This is VRC Chief Nathaniel Bard. So all of Raccoon City's suffering began with the release of a biological weapon known as the T-virus. My employer, the Umbrella Corporation, engineered this virus, and they ordered my team to develop a vaccine, which we did. Now, I keep samples of this vaccine here in my office. The rest of it is stored underground. They don't want the world to know what they've done, so they're trying to erase all evidence that the virus ever existed.
With the knowledge of this cure, Carlos now realizes that Jill's brief lines earlier on about her distrust and hatred towards Umbrella is now revealed to be justified. She knew Umbrella was evil, and Carlos now has proof of that right in front of his own eyes. While this scene is good, it's kind of sadly forgettable because of the fact that there wasn't enough setup between Carlos and Jill's issues. If we saw the two of these characters bickering about this more, if we saw them having issues about trusting each other because of the fact that he works for Umbrella, if we saw anything more than just those two brief lines of them bickering in the beginning, the weight of this moment would be a lot more impactful and memorable. It really is a bit disappointing that these story elements were dropped so much within this game, especially considering the gameplay isn't that great. I find this moment to be so wasteful considering what it could have been. But despite all of this, Carlos is able to secure a sample of the vaccine, enough to cure Jill, and so he dodges all of these hunters within the area to make his way back to her. But before he can get there, we get this really intense moment where you have to defend Jill in the room as you fight off this horde of zombies entering in here. I personally did feel this was a nice change in pace, considering we have to face and fight these infected, rather than just run away like we've been doing throughout most of the rest of the game. Or at the very least what I was doing, because you guys know if I can just run, I'm not going to fight. When in doubt, run it out. What we do, run it. But defeating these infected and giving Jill this vaccine, he goes on to learn that there is an oncoming missile strike for the city.
Attention all citizens. The contagion spreading throughout the city has been designated uncontainable. On October 1st, Raccoon City will be completely destroyed in a missile strike. All residents capable of rational thought are urged to evacuate immediately. This is not a test.
Desperate to save not only themselves, but the entirety of Raccoon City from this fate, he rushes back into the hospital to try and find the secret laboratory where there is not only a stash of the vaccine, but also the formula to create more. And so he leaves Jill behind yet again in the care of his friend. Before Jill wakes up, we get this interesting nightmare sequence where she seems to be worried about Carlos. I'm not quite sure what they are trying to do with these nightmare sequences. I really thought they would have a much larger impact on her as a character, showing us her paranoia more, showing her be terrified of getting infected, maybe stopping her from helping the people around her, just something of impact. But the reality is, they act as just foreshadowing. And with this dream in particular, it's not even an issue about her not wanting to help Carlos here, because she already works so well with him. They already have a mutual understanding, if not a shared admiration for each other. So at this point, what is the purpose of this dream? I feel like Jill would have gone after Carlos either way, whether she knew he was in danger or not. They could have made this way more interesting if the two disliked each other, if they couldn't trust each other, if they couldn't work well together. And then she realized in this moment that she needs to save him because deep down, she's worried for his safety. Then that would be something. But right now, we get nothing from these dreams. Waking up worried for Carlos's safety and seeing that they need to provide a cure to the government to stop the missile launch, she immediately rushes after Carlos into the secret laboratory, where she finds and makes the cure for this infection by herself. As she goes about making this cure, we end up encountering the final enemy type here called the Paleheads, that end up eating a lot of your bullets because they are insanely difficult to drop. Combine that with the fact that you will have this hunter attack section in the middle here, and this end part of the gameplay did take some time. But eventually, Jill will finally have that cure in hand, and as she goes to rush out to get this to the government, knowing that there's a deadline, Nemesis attacks yet again, having tracked her down throughout this laboratory. As Jill hangs there for dear life, holding the edge of the railing, Nikolai appears right in front of her, snatching the cure away, and causing her to fall into the pit to face Nemesis.
What do we have here?
Nikolai, don't! The city needs that vaccine!
More than I do. I don't think wisdom I've been trying to impart on you is getting through. Now I know you can't put a price on life. But I'm in this business to get paid. So let's make a deal. You go down there, battle the Nemesis, and I'll recall it all and sell the combat data. Put on a good show, and maybe I don't need the vaccine. Agreed? Good!
This boss fight is actually very similar to the one that we did earlier, since it's a circular setup here and you have to constantly figure out where Nemesis is running and hiding to. Although this time, Jill is not entirely alone, as Carlos suddenly appears and helps her out. Working together once more, the two of them go on to defeat him and drop him into this pit of acid, as Jill is lifted up and out to safety. But as they go on to chase after Nikolai, who of course did not uphold his end of the bargain, Jill confronts Nikolai at gunpoint before Nemesis interrupts them yet again. With time running out and this bomb approaching the city, Jill convinces Carlos to chase after Nikolai and to leave her behind in order to get that cure, leaving her to fight Nemesis alone in this gigantic mutated form. Now, coming from the previous boss fight, I was insanely low on ammo here, but luckily for us, we not only had ammo scattered around the edges of this room, but also a gigantic super weapon that Umbrella developed and left behind. I won't lie to you guys, this fight took quite a few attempts, but after a while, we got there in the end, and Jill says goodbye to Nemesis once and for all, making sure there is no way he could ever come back to chase after her again.
Come on! Next time, take the fucking hit!
Oh, heck yeah! But doesn't that burn though? He was just an acid.
But stopping Nemesis is not the last thing on Jill's to-do list, and she rushes after Nikolai and Carlos, where she ends up finding Carlos knocked unconscious on the rooftop before Nikolai destroys the cure for humanity in front of her.
You're not going to stop. Promised you this, didn't I?
No!
Jill is then forced with a decision to shoot Nikolai and risk hurting Carlos, or to fail and have the both of them die. I will admit, I like what they were going for here, but the execution of this was so rushed that it doesn't have the same impact that it could have. Going back to those 3 internal conflicts that I pointed out they created for Jill, this is the one they decided to focus on the most, considering that it's the big conflict at the end of the game. This conflict, of course, being that Jill cannot shoot someone who's innocent in order to save herself. And while Carlos is, yes, innocent here, he's gonna die either way, if we're being honest. Like, the lesser of 2 evils is her shooting Carlos, because in the best case she misses, which she does, and in the worst case he dies, but at least it's by her hand instead of Nikolai, who currently has him in a chokehold. It's really just a weird choice, especially because they've already destroyed the cure. There is no cure for humanity. It's not like she's choosing between saving themselves and saving the world. She's literally choosing between saving themselves and saving Nikolai. It's not much of a choice here, so I'm really conflicted by why this is chosen to be the big internal conflict for Jill. And again, if they had established Carlos and Jill's connection to have much more depth to it, shown a little bit of distrust in the beginning and see them work through that, then this would be a lot more impactful. So in the end, it all kind of seems a little bit silly to me. Jill and Carlos quickly board the helicopter and fly away to safety as the missiles are sadly launched and Raccoon City is destroyed. That is not the end though, as we get this final little cutscene where Jill is revealed to have kept the shattered pieces of this vaccine, and with that, Jill Valentine is more determined than ever to take down Umbrella in her final scene of the game. At the end of the day, was this a fun game to play? Yeah, I do think it was a fun way to kill some time. I did have a laugh. It's not like I was miserable the entire time playing through this game. But I did know immediately, the second that it ended, I had no desire to replay it at all. As I write this script, I find myself feeling so disappointed that none of these conflict points were ever truly emphasized in relation to the character of Jill Valentine. She is the main character of this game. There is no second campaign. There is no B story. It is just her, and it's so disappointing to me that we never get to see more from her. We never get to truly connect and know her as a character. When you add this weak character writing to the overall lack of story elements in this game and the severe lack of interesting and tough gameplay elements, I find myself wondering, why did they rush through everything? Why did they keep the game this short when both sides of the scale, the story and the gameplay, both needed more? We needed more from Nemesis, we needed more from these settings, we needed more game, period. But sadly, the creators rushed it, and it really shows. I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do with Jill next. I think she's going to be an interesting character to keep my eyes on. But with that, everyone, if you made it this far into the video, let me know by leaving a little bomb or explosion emoji down below. Because, funny enough, Raccoon City actually gets destroyed on my birthday. I mean, it's off by 1 year, but still, close enough. So if you liked this video, make sure you hit the like button down below, leave that emoji for the funny coincidence there, and also let me know all of your thoughts and feelings on this game. Do you like what they did with Jill? Do you like Nemesis pursuing you like this? Or do you prefer Mr. X in Resi 2? Also, while you're down there, make sure you click subscribe to see more videos from me, and turn on notifications if you want to be notified whenever I post a new video. Thanks for watching, everyone, and I will see you future souls next time. Bye, guys!